order. The current time is 6:31. At this time, I'd like to do introductions, starting with Brian.
Brian Fowler.
Steve Rizek.
Trisha Allen.
Lindsay Hescott.
Sophia Lawton.
Jamie McCallum.
Mary Heather Noble.
Chip Malcolm.
Jason Chance.
Barb Wilson.
Tim Williams.
Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
And for admin in the room.
Susan Steele, Principal of the high school.
Nicole Carter, Assistant Superintendent, Equity and Student Services.
Excellent, thank you. We have a quorum and also online, sorry. Suzanne?
Ellen Wheelan-Weist.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Could you check to see if there's attendees that are,
MCTV and
okay. So this is the time we normally open it up for public comments. Is there any public comments in the room on agenda items? I don't think so. And also any public comments for those listed via Zoom? If you could raise your hand, your Zoom hand. And could you move back over to attendees? Okay, seeing no hands raised, we will continue with our agenda. Next up is approval of the minutes for 122 and 125. Because not everyone was present for both meetings, I will just quickly do them one at a time. So could I have a motion for the January 22nd minutes to approve them?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion, comments? Seeing none and seeing none online, all those in favor of approving the January 22nd minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying nay? Any abstentions? Okay, next up is approval of the special meeting that we had on January 25th. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And a second, thank you. Are there any comments? Go ahead, Tricia.
I'm not listed as being present or absent on that meeting day. I was in fact absent, and that could be added to the minutes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any other comments to the minutes? Seeing any online? No, seeing none. Then those all in favor of approving the January 25th minutes, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Oh, I'll abstain, Barb, just because I missed so much of that meeting, so I was going to abstain.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Moving forward, and thank you, Mary Heather, for once again doing such a great job with the minutes. Next up is approval of the ACSD bills. I would like to turn it over to Chip.
Bills were read on the 29th of January. Jason and I read them. There was one payroll warrant for $940,362.12. There was a warrant for McGilton Fund for $388.42. And then the general fund was for warrant was for $836,074.26. 500,000 of that, grossly calculating it, was healthcare. And so that made up 500 of the 800 and something. So I make a motion to pay the bills having been read.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, then all those in favor of paying the bills as read by Chip, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the bills are approved. Up next on our agenda is the report from our student representative. So I know that Sophia's with us for a while this evening. Do you have anything that you would like to report out?
There's not a whole lot this week, but we just started Winter Carnival, going well. And Hope Happens Here is planning a mental health trivia night for the spring. So there will be updates on that.
Excellent. Any questions for Sophia? Okay, thank you so much. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about Hope Happens Here, please? And the Winter Carnival, because I don't actually know a lot about those things. Do we have a moment for her to
Sure.
just tell us a little bit about those events?
So I don't know a whole lot about the Winter Carnival like planning. It's more of what's it called? Student council. That's more of student council, but it's just about sort of like school camaraderie coming together. And each grade has their own like, sort of point system. And we just do a sort of a tally at the end. It's a way to get the school together. And then Hope Happens Here is just a way of bringing mental health stigma out of the conversation. And the way that we do that is saying it's okay to not be okay. And we do that by doing activities and events in the school, and you're okay to not come to those, but we want them to be available to everyone. So even if you're not in the school, you can come to them, and they're free and available to everyone. So that's what that is.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was very helpful. Any other questions before we move on? Excellent. Thank you so much. Next up is the report of the superintendent. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Williams.
Thank you very much. We have a few items on the superintendent's report tonight, the first of which is a schedule change proposal that the high school has been formulating over the last couple months. This is not something we'll be asking for you to approve or deny. This is just informational in nature. And with that, I'll turn it over to Caitlin.
Thanks so much. Matt, do we have a clicker working? Great, thank you. So, I brought some friends with me, Max Goodfellow and Nava Glickman. And I want to give you an update about what we've been working on, and then ask for them to bring in their expertise in a couple of key places in this presentation. And at the end, there's an opportunity for questions and answers, and we will be your answering panel. And I know Sophia's been on the ground as this has been rolling out too, so I hope in the Q&A section, she won't feel like she needs to hold her tongue. She can answer questions as they come up. So we are in the process of building out a new school day schedule for next school year, so to roll out in August of 2024. This work started in spring of 2023, where we did a pretty significant needs analysis. It started with the question, what's working and not working with IB? But we went broader than that. And we discovered, in that we surfaced that the schedule, the school day schedule is a barrier to needed change in the school. We didn't have the time last spring to do the level of analysis and create the scale of changes that we needed. And so we put a couple of Band-Aids on and then brought a group together to go deeper this fall. So, what have I done? So from September through December of this fall, we had a team of about 15 faculty members working on a schedule redesign, really trying to think together about what do we need and how are we going to get there. That group had a series of goals. We wanted to reduce stress by reducing the number of classes that students take at a time. This is a throwback to an old pre-IB schedule concept at the high school. We wanted to increase access to career center programs and other flexible pathways options. We wanted to build more structures into the day to support academic success. And we wanted to make the school day work better for students and for teachers. So those were our broad goals in this rework. In December of 2023, we had a staff meeting scheduled to review our drafts. It was really 2 new drafts, one that could be implemented in 2 different ways, and then the 4th option was to stick with what we've got. So you'll see we reviewed 4 different concepts. That meeting got canceled because that was the day we closed school early for flooding.
Yep.
And so instead, I sent the information out via, I sent the slideshow out to all of our staff and sent them a survey because we couldn't really pause. We couldn't wait until after the winter vacation to move forward. So we collected feedback that way. So I said that there were 4 schedules, but it was really kind of 2 schedules with a variation and then an option to stick with what we've got. So both of those core schedules improved alignment with the Career Center schedule, offered 25 to 30 minutes of flex with all teachers available daily. That's that window of time when, because all teachers are available, students can flex to the teacher they need to see. Both of them eliminated morning advisory. Both of them included 3 lunch blocks, which is again a throwback to an old model which creates fewer conflicts with band and choir and lunch. Both of them protected time in the school day for band and choir. Both included skinnies. So we have long blocks of 80 to 83 minutes, depending on the version, and a skinny is a half of one of those. And both allowed for semesterized and year-long classes. So the idea of taking, currently a 1-credit class meets every other day for a full block for a year, and a semesterized class for a full credit would meet every day for 1 semester. So that means that students would take fewer classes at a time, teachers would teach fewer students at a time. Okay, so when we put the 4 drafts out, you can see draft C doesn't have much description here. You'll get a lot more information about that. Draft D with the year-long classes and common planning time for departments. Draft D with hybrid year-long and semester classes, but no common planning time. And then sticking with our current schedule. So we asked teachers in that first survey, which schedule option do you think would be best for students? And you can see draft C, 31 out of 36 responses said this one's best for kids. And then we said, okay, so which one's best for staff? I'm failing to click now. No, I missed something. Here it is. So which one's best for staff? 28 out of 36 responses said that same one is best for staff. So that was a pretty popular schedule. So when we met again in January, let me go back. So the draft C, the big positives were, in addition to all the things that both schedules did, this one includes 40 minutes of professional time each morning. And because it does that, it protects common planning time for departments and for teams, like our 9th grade teams, even when we semesterize courses. It allows for a late start / soft start for all students. We'll talk more about that. It creates a 0 opportunity for student learning. It increases learning time available to Career Center students. And it allows teachers to have more face time with students in things like math labs and study halls. Less time alone in their classroom. So those are the positives. So when we gathered in January as a full faculty, we committed. Thanks for battery. Thanks. So we discussed our survey results and we committed to draft C. We made some, edits and refined it, and we started collecting feedback from our students. So that's the process that we've been through so far. We have collected information, feedback from the students, and now we're bringing the big ideas to all of you. So here they are. The school day will officially start at around 8:45. Currently it starts at 8:10. But before school, starting at around 8 o'clock, we'll offer a 0 hour. 0 hour may change names. I think we've taken that name from other things that we read. We need to refine that. The times here, that asterisk is saying that the times aren't final. We've been in conversation, Matt and I have been in conversation with Betcha Transit, and we're really finalizing that. Basically, the 0 hour will start when the buses drop the students off. And the bus schedule will align with all of the other schools in our district.
Can I add one quick thing?
Please do.
We're just trying to make it so that we minimize time on the buses for the youngest kids and kind kind of go in order of age for pickup and drop off. Big behavioral benefits across the board by doing it that way. Right now, Mary Hogan's the last school dropped off in the morning. Some of the longest bus rides for kids.
Thanks, Matt. So why the late start? Nava's the first person I thought of when we were about to roll this out because she came and found me in the cafeteria this fall and made her pitch about late starts because she had done some research for a class project. So go ahead, Nava, what do we need to know?
Okay, so you guys know that I'm Nava, and so I worked on a project and I looked at a lot of research and I also interviewed a bunch of my peers and I even interviewed some teachers on their personal opinions, and then the research kind of showed like, scientific stuff. So I looked at a couple like studies with schools that already made this change, and there were schools that had like from 7:50 to like 8:45 start time changes. Specifically, one was done in like Seattle high schools. And so students got on average like about 40 minutes more sleep, which is how much of a change kind of our school would have too, which is a good for comparison. And they looked at classes and grades and they saw that the amount of tardies and absences dropped and grades were like a little like 4% higher. But also students like mental health improved, their attentiveness in classes improved, and the environment of like drowsiness and in their first period classes and things like that improved. And another piece of information that I looked at was that kind of the science of that teenagers' bodies are already on a sort of completely different internal clock. So our bodies are kind of programmed to work on their own schedule. And the goal would be for the school to work on that schedule too. And kind of at the moment, it's not really, but this schedule change would really help to fit that because like asking a student to be up at 7:30 in the morning is basically the same as asking an adult to be up at like 5:30, which no one wants to do that. That's not fun. So I also did interviews, and so I talked to a lot of my peers. One of my peers that I interviewed said that, you know, when they don't get enough sleep the night before, they end up zoning out in class, and that makes their homework harder. It takes longer. And then they end up going to bed later, and the cycle continues. Another interview that I did, another one of my peers told me that they're tired all throughout the school day, and that especially being, and a lot of students at our school are sports athletes or in extracurriculars and clubs, being involved in that is definitely a balance. And sports games, they come back late, practices run late, and it's hard to balance schoolwork, socializing, being able to sleep, and also doing extra activities. And so, yeah, there's a lot of benefits that can happen. It really improves like mental health and oh, yeah, so there's like sleep deprivation has been linked to a lot of like physical and mental health risks, lower performances in academics, and schools that start later provide like a later start for students to be able to sleep, be more attentive in their classes in the morning, be more balanced in their work. And I can speak to this myself as a student who does extracurriculars, who does sports, and I have homework that I have to get done. I think this is a really awesome idea. I think it would be really helpful to have this extra time in the morning to come to school. And I think it's a great idea, and I think this schedule works really well, so thank you.
Thank you, Nava. So, just to back up everything that Nava just said, I asked, ChatGPT to please summarize the research on later start times in high school. I won't read this for you, but it's living in this document, and it really, you can see in bold, it really does, it did a really lovely summary of much of what Nava just said. And pointed to the American Academy of Pediatrics as a primary source of information on this, and so I've linked to an article there. So this wasn't in your original slideshow, but it's here in the updated one for you. Thanks again, Nava. All right, so this is student feedback now. 132 students responded to our feedback survey on the schedule. I think not all of the questions were required, so we got 129 responses to this one. On a scale of I hate it to I love it, how do you feel about school officially starting at about 8:45 each morning? This is a popular one. Students are fans. So attendance in the 0 hour, what we are currently referring to as the 0 hour would be optional. So in that window of time, we know that those students who ride the bus will be attending the 0 hour because they won't have another option. So because of that, we've been really thinking hard about how do we make that be an incredibly valuable window of time for students. So we know that all of our students receive free breakfast. Now they could not grab and go, but actually sit in the cafeteria, which would be open, and eat their breakfast. Somebody said they could have maple syrup on pancakes. Right? So they would have access to the cafeteria, the library, the learning lab, which would be staffed, the gym and the weight room. We're working on duty stations to cover those spaces. They would have access to school counselors, to school-based clinicians, to nurses, and we're also looking at to what extent would we be able to offer clubs and other learning opportunities. Things like jazz band and camerata singers, which currently happen before school, so you can only participate if you have a different source of transportation, would now fall in the 0 hour when we provide public transportation. So it's it's not totally equitable in that not, if you have to ride the bus, then you will be at the 0 hour, but it increases equity in some of these extracurriculars and even curriculars that happen outside of the school day. So we're still working on the details with a lot of feedback from students and a lot of input from teachers and working with the association on what that window of time looks like. So on the scale of I hate it to I love it, how do the students feel about the 0 hour concept? I love it as a 5. Generally positive about the concept. Advisory will meet only once per day. It currently meets in the morning and then again during opposite lunch. And now it wouldn't compete with lunch, and it wouldn't compete with band and choir. So advisory would really be protected for 25 minutes. We wouldn't be pulling students out for competing interests. We expect that 1 to 2 days a week, they would actually stay with their advisory groups and do things like work on personal project, work on PLPs, work on community building. And on the other days, about 3 days a week, because all teachers are on advisory duty at the same time, they could flex to anybody that they needed to see. So on the scale of I hate it to I love it, how do they feel about all teachers being available during advisory so that a few days a week you can flex? That is highly favorable.
Just what is flex?
Yeah, so flex is that, so your home base is with basically your homeroom teacher, your advisory teacher. But say my homeroom teacher is an art teacher and I really need extra help in math. On days, some days you have to stay with your advisory because we're doing advisory activities, but most days you can flex to the math teacher or you can flex to the social studies teacher. You can check in with people you need to. You could flex to meet with a school counselor to do college planning, that sort of thing. So it literally creates flexibility of where you can be. And then we use an adaptive scheduler to track attendance for that.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah. So there will be 3 lunches instead of 2. This is again a throwback to an old schedule that teachers felt worked a lot better. However, this is the least popular thing among students because our current plan is that the lunches would no longer be divided by grade level and it would be sorted to some extent by participation in music. So the 3 lunches would allow students to participate in band and choir without missing lunch or advisory, and our lunch lines, because we would be divided across 3 lunches instead of 2, would be shorter, so students could move through that more quickly. So on a scale of I hate it to I love it, how do you feel about MUHS offering 3 lunch periods instead of 2?
Sorry.
This is more mixed reviews from the students. So now I'd love for Max, and if Nava has more to chime in on, but for Max to share some feedback with us.
So I come from this perspective as a band student. So I'm one of the students who currently goes to band class during my advisory block of the day. So I love band. I love being in band, but oftentimes I miss a day of school, like I'm sick, or I just need academic support in one of my other classes. And because of the way our current schedule is set, I have to miss a band class or interrupt a teacher's lunch period if they're if my lunch period doesn't align with their flex period. And I don't like missing band. I don't like skipping my classes. So a schedule like this allows me to go and get academic support from my teachers with resources like the 0 hour, and more specifically that 25-minute advisory block where I can have that time solely devoted to getting support, and I could go there multiple days a week without worrying about falling behind in a class like band. So with lunches, band and choir students, so that we have some students at our school who are both band and choir students, and these students alternate every day. So one day they're at band, the next day they're at choir. In a 3-block lunch schedule, these students would be able to attend both band and choir full-time. So like, I don't know if you've seen it, but it would be like band, like the first lunch block, and then they have lunch, and then they go to choir, the final block. So that allows those band and choir students to do 2 arts that they both really enjoy, like fully, they get to participate in the class. But when we were discussing with Ms. Steele, we came up with some, I had some concerns and from things I've heard with other students. As you saw with the 3 lunches, that's controversial, mainly because my peers are worried that they won't be able to have lunch with their friends because of how just how the classes align with how your school's going to be. And like, if you're in both band and choir, you're going to be in that second lunch block, which is probably mostly going to be other band and choir kids. So we talked about it a little bit of potential solutions, like organizing classes in a way that so more 9th and 10th grade students would have like lunch that first block and that first lunch block, and more 11th and 12th graders might have it that 3rd block, just to try to increase the less amount of randomness so people get paired with like their peers. But it's definitely controversial, but overall I think having the biggest thing for me is a devoted advisory block where I can go and I can get academic support without having to worry about skipping one of my classes, and being able to go there multiple times a week. Like just a personal example from my life. Today I went early at 7:30 in the morning to go get extra support with some chemistry that I was doing, and with access to a advisory block, I won't have to worry about missing my band period. I don't have to coordinate with my parents to get me to school at 7:30 in the morning. And I will be able to get that support I need, and it'll increase access for me and other students who may not have the resources to come in early. So I wholeheartedly support the schedule change and the options that it'll create for me and like other band students and just other students in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm not as musically talented, so I am advisory. But there's still an issue with the, schedule that's right now. And that's that juniors and seniors eat lunch at a different time than freshmen and sophomores. And so let's say during my flex period, I want to go flex into a teacher, for example, like my Spanish teacher. She has a senior advisory, and so they're eating lunch and she's eating lunch when I would need to come into flex for help. And that makes it really difficult because that interrupts with teachers' time in the day, rare time in the day, that they get to eat their lunch and they get to, have a moment to prep and plan things. And so this would kind of create like an even space where everyone can go everywhere, and I think it would work a lot more seamlessly than what we have right now. So I also think that that's a really big benefit.
Thank you both. All right, so we'll still have 4 blocks every day, but we'll use the blocks more flexibly than we are using them now. So for instance, many of our classes, as we've mentioned, would meet every day for a single semester. Like if you think about a 9th grader, in the fall semester, they might have lang and lit, their English class, and math for a full semester and get that credit done. And then in the second semester, they might have INS, their social studies class, and science. And so those teachers would see half as many students each semester, and the students would be managing half as many classes. That does not work for the diploma program classes, which need to meet year-round. And so they still will because of the external exam schedule. But that's very much like a throwback to the old model where AP classes met year-round and many other classes were semesterized. So this is a thing that teachers advocated for multiple years and vehemently last spring as they were looking for a schedule that would reduce stress for students and teachers alike.
And the stress caused by,
Stress caused for the students by managing a lot of different classes at once and trying to
okay,
track and
that's
keep
what I
up with the
thought, but you
assignments.
didn't sort of define.
Should we wait for the question to your Q&A or?
Yeah, we've got a section for Q&A at the end, so it'd be great if we went
Okay,
just a little
so
bit. We're
we'll get
almost
back
done.
to you, Ellen, promise.
Oh, nuts. This clicker. Okay, so that means fewer classes at a time for students, fewer students at a time for teachers. And we hope that this is going to reduce stress for everybody. That's the goal.
Okay, for everybody.
For everybody. So for students on a scale of, I hate it, and remember, that's a change that our teachers advocated for, because the students currently in our building don't remember, they weren't here for that old schedule.
Right.
So when we ask the students on a scale of I hate it to I love it, how do you feel about having fewer classes each semester? It's generally favorable. Our diploma program students will feel less of that impact.
Mhm.
So the MUHS schedule will align better with the Career Center, so students will have less open time between programs and easier access to classes in both buildings. We've reduced sort of open time between, when a program ends there and when their next class starts, and we've created more skinnies so that if students come back and they have something less than 83 minutes left in their day, they can still get an academic class in. So the new schedule creates more opportunities for teachers to support students in study halls, learning lab, and at other times of the day. So while it shortens the blocks from 83 minutes to 80 minutes, it creates more opportunities for teachers to work individually and with small groups of students. And let me explain how that works. So currently we've got, if you think of a day, B day, odd day, even day, 2-day cycle of 8 blocks, our teachers teach 5 of those 8 blocks. So 1 block a day is protected for planning time, for personal planning time, and 1 block every other day is protected for departmental planning time. By moving the departmental planning time into the 0 hour, so that they can once a week meet or twice, meet with their department, another day meet with their team, because all teachers are available at once, then and otherwise have other duties and responsibilities. By moving that into the 0 hour, it takes that 6th block and it frees it up to work with students. So while we shorten the student day, we increase face time with teachers.
Now the Q&A.
Now the Q&A.
And so since Ellen had her hand up, and Suzanne does too, so. So we'll start with Ellen.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thank you to the students. This is really interesting. I just had some questions that immediately popped up, Caitlin, when you were talking about classes meeting every day for a semester in many cases, as opposed to intermittent or every other day or whatever the current schedule is over 2 semesters. how will teachers need to adjust their curriculum? Or I'm especially thinking about sort of homework assignments to make sure that it's not just converting what might be assigned over 2 days. If you're meeting on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, to now meeting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm sure that you're all thinking about it, but I wonder if there's also been discussion about any curricular changes that would have to come from this schedule adjustment.
So we haven't talked about changes to the curriculum. What we've talked about is how do we match, this schedule can be used pretty flexibly, right? You could meet every day for a semester, every other day for a year, every day for a skinny, every other day for a skinny. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you could meet. And what we've done is thought about, if you think about seat time as credits, which I know is not proficiency-based work, but it's a logic model that helps us make schedules. If you think about seat time, we've said, so these different structures would work for a half credit class, these different structures would work for a full credit class, and then in departmental meetings, we've talked about, okay, so which of these structures would work for the classes that you teach. And so we have a whole spreadsheet with every class that we offer in the school and the teachers' perspectives on what is the best structure for this class and what is a structure that would work, even if it's not the best, so that we have enough flexibility so that next week, Stephanie Buzzle, who manages Power School and our scheduling, and I will work on the computer when it's quiet in the school and try to make the magic happen with the algorithms. So we're really not talking about changing the curriculum as much as matching the structures of the schedule to meet the curriculum needs.
Excellent, thank you. Suzanne?
Thanks, Caitlin, this is great. And students, I love your perspective and your comments, those are helpful as well. So I had a couple of questions. You mentioned the zero time at the beginning of the day. So for students that arrive on the bus, can they reach out and work with a teacher during that time if they need extra assistance, or do they have to wait to another time? So there's one question. So I'm just gonna give you my questions and you can either choose to answer or say you wanna think about them. Another question I had when I was trying to work my way through the different schedules was, so what about, we've had in the past students that have done their utmost best to complete their studies at MUHS, take classes at the Career Center, and then they have also been passionate about either band or chorus. And so I'm wondering, do any of these schedules allow for students to do all three and still get lunch? Because that has been an issue in the past, that if they wanted to do all three, they pretty much ate lunch on the run. And then and I know we don't have a lot of these, but in the past, when we've had snow days or early release or late to school days, how would those types of issues be dealt with within the schedule if you're going to like an AB or type of schedule? So those are just my questions, but great work. And the ability to bring a student back the next day is research proven to reteach within 24 to 48 hours is your best time zone. So great work, kudos to all, and look forward to hearing more.
All right, Suzanne, I'm gonna see if I can answer your questions, if I can remember them. So as far as can students work with teachers during the 0 hour, we are actively working on what are the teacher assignments during the 0 hour. So we know that our teachers would meet with their department at least once a week. Those teachers who are on teams, whether it's 9th grade teams or our Aspire team, would have a team meeting. Sometimes they would be in IEP or 504 meetings. And then we are also thinking about what are the duties that they would have in terms of weight room coverage, gym coverage, office hours. So the answer is probably, but we haven't nailed down those components of the schedule yet. And again, we're working with student input on what they want to see happen in the 0 hour. We're working with teacher input on what they think would be of value. And we're working with the association to make sure that whatever we design fits within the contract. So yes, I think there will be some access to teachers, but it would be very structured. The second question was about
Career Center.
the Career Center, yeah. So on Friday, we did a nice whiteboard session with our music department to say, okay, so if this is the schedule, how do we maximize access to the arts and academics, including Career Center classes? And we really looked at all of those. If you've seen a copy of the schedule, I pasted one in here. There are more slides here with more data from kids and also the actual schedule that we're looking at. Oh, these are our next steps, sorry. Let's go back to that. Where did it go? It might be the very end.
The schedule is at the very end, I think.
It's the very end, yeah. So this, there it is. So this is,
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, this is 6 different students on the same day. These are kids who are only at the high school, and these are kids who are in the green is the Career Center. So you can see that students could do band, jazz band or camerata singers in the morning. They could do a Career Center morning session. They'd have room for a skinny block here, think English class, right? They would have a full lunch here, and then they could go, oh, sorry. One of them, oh, now I've confused myself. One of these allows for them to do band and lunch and a Career Center, but one of them does not. And so I think that what we're working on is how do we maximize access? I was thinking that morning one allowed band, but I must be not thinking correctly. And we actually are looking at, what are the course offerings in the Career Center and which are the ones that conflict most with our arts? And do we have any flexibility there? So we actually have a couple of questions posed to the Career Center right now, and we'll stay in conversation about that. By moving, currently for camerata singers and for jazz band, if you want to participate in those more selective musical performing groups, you're required to participate in the full band or the full choir. And one of the things that we've talked about is if your schedule forces you out of that and you cannot access because of the Career Center, those larger ensemble groups, we would make an exception and allow you to do the 0-hour ones. So we're really in conversation about how do we make it all work. And then the last question was about, what was the last one?
Snow days.
Snow days.
Oh, they would work the same way that they do now.
Early
So we have odd even days. The middle school has A-day, B-days. I can't remember, I think Virgins has A and B and Mount Abe has maroon and white, right? And everybody's got a different name for the same thing. So we just made an executive decision. We're going A-B because it's the most common format. And so we will track, just like we always have, where we set the dates with our neighboring districts about what's an A-day, what's a B-day. And then a snow day can't screw it up. Because if you get off, like if Thursday was a B-day, but the A-day Wednesday closes down because of snow, Thursday is still a B-day. Because we all have to stay on track so that we can work with the Career Center well. So that won't change at all. We are thinking about how do we use our mornings of our early release days more flexibly for better impact rather than just doing mini versions of our regular classes. So that might flex, but it won't impact this.
Brian.
Sure. I have two considerations that I would like incorporated before the formation process is completed for this schedule change. And I don't have an answer to this first one, but I have a question about it. What would be the impact is my statement. And it is, if a student is absent on a day or more, students will miss more than if they had kept the regular schedule for a course. I don't know how that would be made up, and I would like that to be considered. Secondly, I think what we need, besides change, is a process for evaluating how this change actually functions. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? How are we going to evaluate it? So next year or whenever, most of it worked, but here's some changes. I want to see an evaluation process. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Any other? Okay, so, here we go. I don't know who was first.
Mary Heather.
Mary Heather, okay.
Caitlin, I guess my question centers around Obviously, kids who are enrolled in the full DP program won't necessarily see as much flexibility in the schedule. And I'm thinking of kids who may not be enrolled in the DP program, but still take DP classes like SL, English, or whatever, and whether or not they're committing to do a certificate or not. How does this work for those students? Like, because for many of, for the teachers, at least now, it's the same class. Some kids are committed to the full DP, some kids are there just to take it as their English class. So how does this new shift work with those kids who may not be enrolled in full DP, but obviously are still taking the same classes as many of those DP kids?
So that will be many of our students who are taking some diploma program classes for certificates or not for certificates, and also some classes that don't fall within the DP curriculum framework. They'll have a hybrid schedule. Some of their classes will meet every other day all year. If they do a second year of it, it'll meet every other day for 2 years, and some of their classes will meet every day for a semester. And so they won't have maybe 4 classes a semester, but they also won't have 8 classes a semester. They'll have 5 or 6 or so. And that is a mess, and we schedule that by computers.
Yeah. And is there any situation where in order for a student to have that flexibility and still be taking those, like, I'm starting to go into the weeds, I'll just stop.
Well, I can tell you that I dream of a day when we take an SL class.
Yeah.
And instead of offering it every other day for 2 years, offer it every day for 1 year.
Yeah.
Because it's the same amount of face time.
Yeah.
But you get it done in a single year. And so if you think of a diploma program student who has to take 6 of these rigorous classes at once, if they could get one of them done junior year and just check the box.
Yeah.
And then do another one senior year, then they could have 5 classes instead of 6. One of them would meet every day. So that is, that's aspirational right now. I don't know if we can force the computer to do it this year. So I keep sort of saying I'd love to see that happen, but all of this needs to be worked out in our Power School Scheduler program. So I don't want to feed it too many rules.
Yeah.
Ellie? And then Jamie.
Well, first I want to say that this looks really familiar. This is very similar to the schedule that was at at the high school when I attended. And I'm excited about the change because having so many classes for my sons who've gone through there has been a lot. And I keep telling them, well, when I only had to do 4. What are you doing with all these courses? But I'm concerned about the 0 hour at the beginning. I really agree with and love the information about the later start, but it's really not going to benefit most of the kids that in the district, except the ones that are within walking distance or that are lucky enough to have a ride. And, the bus comes to our house at 6:55. It's going to be really hard to get my teenagers on the bus at 6:55 when they know they don't have to be to school really until 8:45. And I think that a lot of people will cave and drive their kids instead of utilizing the bus when they don't have to be there as early, which will reduce the ridership, which I think we need to be looking at ways to do the opposite and get more kids on the bus and reduce the traffic issues we're having in Middlebury, and it will make that worse. So I'm just curious if it was considered of putting the 0 hour at the end of the day and or trying to coordinate having all of the schools start later and do this on a wide scale.
This was a bold proposal. And I learned very early on that I couldn't go forward if I was going to force a change in any other building, right? Which was fair. And so we got creative, and that's where the concept of the 0 hour came from. I have some good news for you, but I promise I won't get it to perfectly equitable. The good news is that our buses pick up really early right now, in part because they're working really hard to drop kids off at Mary Hogan at 8 a.m. And everybody else, no, they're dropping the kids off at us and then going to Mary Hogan at 8 a.m. because that's when the doors open at Mary Hogan. So they're dropping at the high school and they're dropping at the middle school and then they're dropping at Mary Hogan. And in the new model that we've been working on with Betcha, they would be dropping at Mary Hogan first at 8 a.m. So everybody who's getting up should get up a little bit later, right? The buses don't need to be at the high school at 7:40 anymore, so they can make it to Mary Hogan by 8 a.m. So it should mean that even our little kids get a little more sleep time and a slightly later pickup. So that should be better. The bad news is that when we ask the students, do you ride the bus? 71%, this is 132 responses, said, or 129, 71% said no. 15% said yes, and 14% said sometimes. When we have, as we were planning this and thinking it through, we literally one morning stood and counted how many kids are getting off of this bus. And that day, about 20% of our kids rode the bus. And we think actually about 30% in general ride. So very few kids ride the bus, which is a problem, but it's a fact.
I just want to add that Mary Hogan thing won't affect the kids from the farther away towns because they don't ride the Mary Hogan buses, and like the Salisbury Elementary starts at 7:45, so the kids get there at like 7:35 off the bus, and that won't change for the high schoolers.
Yeah, I promised I wouldn't.
And the Bridgeport school starts at 7:30 when I get dropped off, so.
Right.
We are, the good news is that this exploration has
Uncovered.
created a deep dive in our busing schedules in general, and Dee at Betcha has been a great thought partner. So we hope to make some of those things better.
Jamie,
I don't get to call on you.
and then Jamie and then Steve. Jamie, you still have a question?
It's Q&A.
You can go.
Oh, okay, yeah. Also, I just think it's, just important to think about that, like 50% or so, because like upperclassmen and a good portion of sophomores, once you get past like December, drive to school, and not to, say it like impacts some grades a little more, but juniors and seniors who are doing the DP program and even just those more rigorous classes, it gets harder as you do more years in high school. It is more important to get more sleep when you're in those harder classes, and I just think it's so really beneficial that like allows for that. And also I think you can think of it kind of as like a study hall as your first class for those 40 minutes. And I've had that before where I get to go to school and it's still not awesome, but I get 40 minutes of more relaxed, not listening to a teacher, having to try to like focus and understand, wrap my head around what's happening, versus like being able to sit in a classroom and take things on my own time. So either way, I think that what's it called? 0 hour would still be like really beneficial, even if you still have to be at the school early.
Go ahead, Jamie.
So, well, first of all, so as someone, as a high schooler, I lobbied my school board to start later, and I was laughed out of the room. So I appreciate you guys coming here. I did not have the data that you're bringing. And I've also taught courses at the college at 8:15, and it's a bad idea. It's like, it's not a good idea. And so I totally support this. I guess that I don't understand, Caitlin, the thing about the computer. Like, I don't understand if that's a metaphor or something. Is it?
No, it's a scheduling software.
Yeah.
So we will feed
So-
the rules of what we're trying to accomplish and the students' preferences for what classes they want to take. And it will use algorithms to build us the best possible schedule. And once it does that, we'll see how many students have not been matched with their first choice classes. And then we manually fix as many things as we can.
Okay, so it seems to me the thing you were saying was that the I think you were asking about too, the sort of IB diploma situation is most constricted by the computer. You're like, I can't feed everything at once kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's that or if it's the IB requirements in general or whatever. I'm just trying to figure out, I just heard from so many people over the years, like about the stress related to that thing, and that changes the least. Again, I mean, is it Nava? You were saying that like that 0 hour is great, sounds great, but like that seems to be a huge source of stress for a lot of people. That changed the least. So I'm just curious what the flexibility might be there in the future.
Yeah, so the diploma program is probably the most challenging thing to schedule. It might not be true, but it's a very challenging thing to schedule because the requirements are so specific, right? You have to have 6 classes, they have to hit these 6 different categories, or if not this one, then 2 of this one,
Right.
and they have to meet this many hours, and you have to have the extended essay and the theory of knowledge. Like, it's a real puzzle. And so when we say, like, how do we maximize access to music? The first place I start is I draw the schedule and I write the requirements of the diploma program and look for any opening in the day.
Right,
And say, and can you fit this, right? So we look at those really tight ones as a thought process to make sure, to demonstrate to ourselves that we're building a thing that can run. So as far as can I run an SL class, that standard level class, in a single year versus 2, the fact is that when I plug the rules into the computer, I won't do it. When Stephanie plugs the rules into the computer, she needs to say, okay, so Lang and Lit, DP, year 1, SL, and she can give it needs to meet every other day for 2 years. She can give it 1 rule.
Right,
And then the
okay.
computer will make that work. She can't give the same class 2 rules.
Right.
And so when I'm trying to like make it work, I'm just trying to feed as few rules as possible
Okay,
into the
okay,
system
yeah.
to try not to make it so rigid that it breaks or that it fails to match kids with the classes that they're trying to take. So I think that once we have it built and running and, you know, to Brian's point, and we evaluate it over time, we can continue to modify. I would love for us to get down to a place where where students are taking 5 DP classes junior year and 5 DP classes senior year,
Uh-huh.
getting 1 done. That would be a measurable way to reduce stress
Okay.
and course load. But the research is really solid on this late start as being
Yeah.
significant for mental health
yeah.
and stress reduction, right? And so I actually think that is a contribution to reducing the load for our
Yeah.
DP students.
Okay, and I kind of need to move us on. I know Steve had a question.
So, well, actually, that's what I was gonna make more of a point of order. I mean, I have like a list of questions. And obviously, Caitlin is doing a fantastic job
Yeah.
in here. I would go back to Tim's point. It's not our job to do this.
Right.
They're just informing us. So if you do have questions and observations, I mean, I'm gonna write this up and send it to Caitlin. And she's already doing a great job. I don't think we're gonna solve this in this
Thank
room,
you.
so.
Thank you, guys.
There are morning people and there are non-morning.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I would like to thank our students as well for
Yeah.
participating and for
Very
your
helpful.
perspective.
Thank you,
That was
Nava. Thank you,
awesome. And sorry
It
to
was
kind of
really good.
like
Thank
rush
you.
us. Thank goodness we had extra time because we were moving very quickly. So we're not too far behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for coming.
Thank you very much, guys.
Where we the support system.
Okay. As you're probably well aware, we've been consumed lately by
Bye, Mike. Thank you.
As you can imagine, we've been consumed lately by Act 127 and its expected changes. I think we're probably sick and tired of talking about Act 127 at this point, but it's still really important. And there are some pending changes coming that we fully expect the legislature to adopt as early as
Today, tomorrow.
Tomorrow for the,
tomorrow
House.
to move out of committee.
Could move out of committee.
it's already out of committee. It's going into another committee.
Yeah.
And then maybe a vote by Wednesday or Thursday,
Yeah,
Wednesday probably.
and it's fully.
That's the House, but it's got to go through the Senate.
And that should be a quick sale as well. And there's no question that the governor will sign the bill. So, well, the information that we'll be presenting tonight is probably about as close to the actual legislation that will be adopted. It's been gelling really well, and we're hearing consistent information from various places. So what we're going to discuss tonight is probably going to be the way this thing is going to land. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, so for some of you, this is going to be the second time today that you've heard this presentation. Sorry for that.
That's okay.
But it's, if there's ever been a year to go over the material twice, this is the one. So, this presentation is meant to give a broad level summary to capture all of the proposed changes to Act 127. As Tim just alluded to, this is still proposed, it's working its way through, and so we're trying to not refer to this in the presentation as the new law, but there are no indications that it will not soon become the new law. I think that the main thing that is leading to the repeal of the 5% property tax cap portion back to 2027 is the idea that as we move towards budget approval season, a lot of boards have approved budgets already. The state's economists were realizing that there was going to be no way for the new spending projected in those budgets to be funded using property taxes if the 5% cap rule were in effect. The spending was simply so high that the yield would have to drop through the floor in order for tax rates to be high enough to fund everything. What does that mean? It means that every single district in the state, regardless of outcome of the tax capacity, would have hit the cap, and there still wouldn't have been enough money. So it was a crisis at the 11th hour. Nobody wants to change the rules this late in the game. It's inconvenient for the government, it's inconvenient for voters, it's inconvenient for school administrators, and of course for school boards too. So it really was a no choice change. The new mechanism that's replacing the cap, so no more cap. The new mechanism is being called the transition mechanism. Not a very original name, but I think the one word in here that's worth paying attention to is transition. What is this meant to do? It's meant to take districts that were disadvantaged by the loss of tax capacity and ease the transition over the next 5 years as tax rates and school spending equalizes. The major difference here is that instead of every single district being able to take advantage of a 5% cap, regardless of advantage or disadvantage, only the disadvantaged districts are now going to be able to receive tax relief in the form of a transition mechanism, which is a discount. Okay, so anyone we'll see the graph in a second, anyone who's on the positive side of the zero excess will not receive a discount. And the discount is meant to be proportionate, right? So this is realizing that a one-size-fits-all cap was not the right approach, and that they really needed to tailor the discount and the transition mechanism to the relative proportion of loss incurred by each district. How much was your share of the ed fund this year, and how much did you lose in FY25 because of the new weighting? What's the difference in those two pieces of the pie? Remember, it's only the pieces of pie that got smaller. How much smaller did your pie get? That is the percentage change that the state is measuring and basing the discount around. So this is they call it the S-curve chart that the state plotted out and released to everybody. I'm sure many of you have seen this. What it does is it charts every single district's relative gains or losses under the new weighting system across the state. So you can see that there's a range from about a loss of 30% tax capacity all the way up to plus 42. And that's the old, we call that the Winooski. But you know, with a pretty tight clustering in the middle, in that, you know, plus 15, minus 15 range. And if we split that up, anything that's above zero would be the advantage districts, whether you gained half a percentage point of advantage or 35 percentage points of advantage. If you're above the line, there will be no cap, there will be no discount. And so these are districts that might have been in the old system taking advantage of that 5% cap and trying to, looking forward to getting a 10% budget through for the price of 5%, right? Because the cap was a law and you could do that. We're expecting, and as we talk about the yields on future slides, We're expecting this to be an area where we do see some significant spending cuts because there is no more tax rate mitigation for these districts. Next band would be sort of that minus 1 to minus 10 band. These would all receive a discount, but again, especially in that minus 5 to minus 10 range, these are people who might have been taking advantage of the cap to push a budget through that would represent 6 to 10% budget growth for the price of 5%. Under this new proposed legislation, that discount would be proportionate to the disadvantage. 1 cent per percent is the rule. So anyone who's disadvantaged here might also cut spending because their actual rate might need to come down. In this last band that we're looking at, we've got disadvantaged in the 11 to 29%, also receiving the discount, also equal 1% per cent. And you can see ACSD highlighted there with that darker dot, red circle. So that's where we fall on the state continuum of tax advantage or disadvantage. Again, we're in the bottom 6th, which is a surprise to us to see. We knew that we were disadvantaged. It was a surprise to see our position relative to the field here. Any questions on that before?
I have a quick question.
Mary Heather?
So the plotting of this S curve, was this plotted before when there was a 5%, or was there just no need to look at the specific percentage of lost tax capacity for each school
released
district?
to us until the
Because this hasn't
current
changed.
conversation. So they might have had it internally. They didn't.
Okay,
It would have helped.
Yeah, it would have been great to have it.
okay.
Yeah, we didn't know any of this. We didn't know where we sat.
Right.
We knew we were under the 0 line, but we didn't know where we were on the other.
Right.
So
Okay,
Yeah, but the
There-
map,
there-
this
there
is the original law.
yeah.
there
that's what
there
I
is,
thought.
the advantage is that we know who we're with. We're with Stowe, we're with Colchester, not with Colchester, but Stowe and Norwich and South,
Yeah.
is it South Burlington or?
Yeah.
Yeah, and CVU. So that's where we are.
Okay.
And,
Stratton.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we're going to work from here into this next one where we're taking 3 hypothetical towns and just going to kind of work through the scenario with a fixed set of assumptions for each of them. The assumptions are all districts begin with a district tax rate this year of $1.40. Each district in our example is going to see spending growth in their budget and would have been taking advantage of that 5% cap. And so for District A, their change in capacity went up. So they were one of those winner districts, a small winner, +5. Their capped district tax rate would have been $1.47 because remember they started at $1.40. 5% cap brings them up to $1.47. However, once they lose that cap, their actual EDTR goes up to $1.61 because they put forward a spending plan that resulted in a 15% budget increase or 15% tax rate increase, and we're taking advantage of the cap. Under the new discount, they received nothing because they're advantaged, and so their discounted tax rate stays at $1.61 plus 15%. That district is now saying, do we want a 15% property tax increase to the base rate, or do we want to cut spending? That's what's happening at those board meetings. For District B, they're a slight loser. So we've got a -5% change in capacity year to year. They would still wind up with that same capped district tax rate of $1.47. Their actual tax rate would be $1.61 because they did the same thing that District A did. They put a budget together that resulted in a 15% property tax increase. And we're trying to take advantage of the fact that that would be capped at only 5 for them. They lost the cap. However, because they were disadvantaged, they got a discount. What's the discount? It's the same as the percentage disadvantage. So for them, it was 5 cents. That brings that $1.61 down to $1.56. So A and B, very similar, other than their change in capacity being either positive or negative. You can see here for 1, you got a plus 15, and then for B, you've got plus 11%. So that's just, kind of an example highlighting the difference between one side of the line or the other. For District 3, we took a sample from a little bit further down in the disadvantaged part of the spectrum. This is a minus 15% change in capacity. And again, because this budget would have been capped, it would have been the same $1.47. However, when you lose the cap, you see that it's actually $1.75, a plus 25% actual tax rate. But because the disadvantage was 15%, the discount is 15 cents. That brings that down to $1.60, which is a plus 14% budget. So, 3 districts kind of strategizing with the same type of spending plan, but based off of their differences in starting position, 3 very different outcomes. All right. The main point here is to illustrate the mechanism of losing the cap, applying the discount. What we're not saying in this example to control for variables is that the yield is going to be a moving target that we have to consider in our arithmetic. In all of this, the yield is going to increase. When the yield increases, the district tax rate decreases. And so that's the one thing that's fixed here, so it's not necessarily accurate as far as actual rates. This transition mechanism tapers, just like the cap was going to taper or sort of create this tapering for 5 years, the discount also tapers. So it drops 20% for 5 years, 20% per year. For District A, they never had a discount, don't worry about it. For District B, they're starting at 5 cents discount, that drops 1 cent per year. For District C, looking at a 13-cent discount, and that would drop 20% rounded to the nearest cent.
Actually, the District C, if it was 15.
Yeah, if it was 15, it would drop just, regular
So I
2
mean,
cents.
we're at 13, just to be
Correct,
clear on that.
correct. All right, so that's the mechanism. The next thing that's a big variable is the property yield. And so everyone's taken their turn trying to do their best to define what a property yield is. I thought Barb had a very good definition today, which is if we were to take the state ed fund as it were today and determine how many weighted pupils it could fund, the yield is that number. How many weighted pupils could we fund with the ed fund as it is today? And the difference between where it is today and where it needs to be is what needs to be raised in taxes. The other ways that I've figured out how to think about it is it's the value of that first dollar of tax rate, right? So the tax rate needs to have a basis. This is the state's calibration of what is that first dollar worth. You can imagine a hypothetical state of Vermont that has 3 houses in it, and they're all worth collectively $1 million 1 year. And in the next year, all 3 of those houses are now worth $2 million because property values increase. That increase in property value would trigger 2 things. It would trigger a bigger yield because the state's going to be able to get more tax revenue from each of those homes. But it would also trigger a low CLA because that's going to trigger a need for reappraisal. Now, sale prices have outpaced assessed prices. So there is historically this direct link between high property values and low CLAs, and those balance each other out. Just keep that in mind. The last part about the yield is that it is the state's lever, right? And so the state, independent of that property value and CLA slider, is looking at this as like, okay, if all of this new spending pressure comes into the ed fund and makes fundraising seem very difficult, their only lever that they can pull is to lower the yield. What does lowering the yield do? It raises tax rates. Okay. Quick example here, if the state were to say that $1 of tax rate would support $10,000 of per pupil spending, then the yield would be set at $10,000. If a district then says, okay, well, we want to spend $15,000 per pupil because that's what our budget says we're going to spend, the district tax rate would then be $1.50 because they're going to go out and say, all right, we don't need 10,000 per student, we need, or per weighted student, weighted pupils. We need 15,000 per weighted pupil. So that's kind of the relationship between budgeted spending and the state's yield. I guess the last piece here is that without cutting spending, a yield decrease will mean a tax rate increase. So we're fixing spending. And then the inverse is also true. So again, without changing or cutting spending, a yield increase will mean a tax rate decrease. All right.
And we love this guy this morning.
The CLA was getting a bad rap, so I had to step in here and set the record straight. Well, I was just explaining that in a landscape where property values have continued to appreciate, which is the landscape that we're in now, you would see historically a low CLA. That's showing that sale prices have outpaced assessed prices. But that would lead to a higher yield as each homestead brings in more tax revenue. What's happening this year is that, but that whole effect has been masked by the 5% cap and all of the additional spending pressure it put on the ed fund. And so that additional spending pressure did not let the yield go up, and it was artificially suppressed by all that pressure. So it wasn't really the CLA that's to blame, even though the CLA, if you're doing your town tax calculation, is that last number where you take something that's saying, oh, it's only going to go up 5% until I hit it with this CLA, and all of a sudden I've got a 15% town tax rate. Well, it's not the CLA's fault. It is entirely a byproduct of that cap keeping the yield low. And as the cap is repealed, we're expecting that the yield will rise. As the yield rises, the district tax rate will fall to a level that a low CLA will impact it much less.
Any questions on this? Because I know this has been crazy. Mary Heather.
But just to clarify, so obviously having the tax cap go away and remove that artificial suppression of the impact on the yield. Okay, so now the EDTR could behave the way it's expected to. But even still, the CLAs that we have are still going to impact the calculation of property taxes. So it's not, maybe it's not the worst villain, but it is still having an impact that is notable and not within our control.
That's true. I think that, I guess the pushback is that there's nothing you can do to control the CLA, right? Like that's it's not where you should put your frustration.
No, I guess what I'm saying from a, being to communicate our budget.
Yeah.
and the impact that it's ultimately going to have on our taxpayers, which is a full calculation that includes EDTR and CLA, that we have to.
And one I'd like
Consider
to
both.
add on top of that though, is if you look at our CLAs a year ago, they were all below 100%. So it's really the delta. So the CLA is already doing some impact for this year.
Mhm.
And so when we look at like our tax rate of, whatever it ends up being, yes, you compute it a new one based on the CLA, but what they experience, the delta, is going to be different than that because they're already paying a little, more because of their CLA.
Mhm.
So it gets kind of complicated.
Yeah, of course. I guess the thing that I just want to emphasize is that when people come to us and they complain about their taxes going up X%,
Right.
that those of us that are talking to folks who have that
Right.
complaint can say, okay, well, these are the factors, and the factor that the school district has control over is
This piece.
this piece. And it's,
Right.
please don't just vote us down because of the larger, broader circumstances in
Yeah.
Vermont.
Ryan?
Just a quick question. If I was an individual homeowner and you had all this information that was presented, you would indicate to that person his real estate taxes were either gonna stay the same, go up, or go down. What is your view?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Everybody's taxes are
I
going
mean,
up.
because you can't present all this information to the public. You have to be able to say, I've gone through all this,
Exactly,
and here are my conclusions.
exactly.
What is your conclusion? That's what I need to know.
the tricky part about that is the answer would rely on home site value, household income, and the unknown of what the yield, where the yield lands. So every taxpayer pays first and foremost based off of their household income, and under, I think, $127,000 of combined household income, there are property tax credits that offset the.
Yeah, the homestead.
And then below a certain homestead value, same thing. So there's a whole tool that we've built that will give you information down to the individual taxpayer's personal situation. But I think if we're looking at it a little bit bigger picture, as Barb was saying, the yield is the main slider right now. We need to look at what happens as that yield increases and how that impacts our EDTR.
So from what you've told me, right now, we can't answer the question because we don't have enough information.
Right now, what we're hoping is that it has no impact other than what the board approved budget would have had, right? So we're aiming to get right back to where we were.
So is your question, Brian,
So still going up.
before
Mostly.
this new transition method or in general,
No, with the new transition, what I'm trying to determine is whether real estate taxes are going up. And I know there's all kinds of variables.
right.
And so it's a
Well, they were gonna go up with the old one too.
Right.
gonna go up.
They're
They're gonna go
So
up.
yes, the answer is
Yeah,
yes.
so the answer is
Okay, so
yes.
I've had 10 people say they're gonna go up. Now I wanna know how much they're gonna go up.
Well, that's the problem.
All right, that's.
That's the fuzzy one,
That's
yeah.
fine. Okay.
I know, because I know I've seen this presentation. There is the presentation on the yield, and I think when people see how much a slight change in the yield
Yes, thank you.
radically changes the tax
Yeah.
rates, this is why we can't predict.
Okay.
Because we've had these, on the left, we've had these three numbers thrown at us, and look at the difference to the tax rate.
Right.
If it ends up just going up to 11,000,
Oh my God, we'd be like,
we'd
be
be
amazing.
$1.32, we would actually be paying less taxes. So we would love to answer your question, but given the radical shifts that happen because of this, we don't know. And the state doesn't know, and nobody knows, so.
And the good news is that 9775 is been updated. So it's gone up from what we knew to be true before, based on the anticipated beginning, looking at these new changes. So, we're in the right direction. We're going in the right direction. I'd love to see it 10,000 or more.
Totally.
I prayed every night for. Go ahead, Mary Heather, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. But just to be clear, for the purposes of the public record and anybody who's tuned into this, based on what we know right now, and what we've been told about the current yield, that it's at about 9,775, could go up, not unlikely to go up to 10,000. This is the sort of range that we're talking about,
Yes.
right? So this is which is going up. That's our EDTR, and when you combine that with everybody's CLAs, the expected outcome is that taxes would go up. It sure would be great if the yield goes way up and we're all surprised. But I think in terms of educating our voters and being transparent and forthcoming with what we're expecting to happen, I think that's the range we're talking about. Is that a fair?
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is, again, a look back in time from when we received the December 1st letter. The initial property yield as it came out then, 94.52. In January, it was dropped to 91.71, which was what was baked into the budget book when we put it forth for approval. Based off of the doomsday scenario, as information came in to the state, leading to the need to repeal this the cap, it got down as low as 7,100.
Can you imagine?
Which is kind of what forced their hand.
They all panicked more than we did.
You can see why it's on the fast track.
Yeah.
And then it bounced right back to 97.75 when the cap was replaced with the discount. Again, it's not final yet, and we still have a long way to go. What's the difference between 97.75 and 10,000? That's those spending cuts for those districts that are potentially losing the cap that they were relying on and aren't happy with the actual rate that they're now facing.
Yeah.
And the anticipated spending cuts that are going to precipitate from that. That's a passive thing, right? That's something that we're just sort of sitting here and saying we hope that it gets there. But we know that if it does get us to 10,000, that's going to land us at $1.48 district tax rate, which is 1 cent away from where we were in the board approved budget.
Yeah.
So that's the soft landing scenario. I think that it requires us to sort of keep a close eye on the yields and see where it lands. Again, there's that $1.48, which equates to 5.7%. At 10,500, we're down to the 0.3% year-to-year rate change. So, yeah, it would be great to be able to have a real high yield come in and wipe out that entire 5% rate that we're facing. But I think that, again, it's behooves us to sort of stay conservative in our optimism and set our sights on that 10,000 benchmark as a realistic goal. This is some of the historical EDTR information, which takes us back to 1 year before districting and shows the weaving of all of our town tax rates into a single district tax rate in FY18, and then sort of the 6-year roller coaster that we've been on. I think it's important to remember that last year, the state cashed in a lot of its ed reserves or its own sort of COVID ESSER reserves to artificially lower that tax rate to give people as much cushion as they could, but it created this trough, right, where that was an artificially low year. And we are, one way or the other, being asked to climb out of that trough without any new sort of revenue injection from the state. So there's going to be an uptick in tax rate. We're just trying to mitigate how much it is. And obviously in those previous years where we're seeing EDTRs above $1.50 and closer to $1.75, we would assume that it wasn't against CLAs that were as low as they are now, right? So that's the other piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Property has definitely appreciated over this time span.
Yeah, Ellen's got a question.
I'm sorry. I was just a little confused on this slide. Are we looking at the combination of all the schools and just Waybridge after FY18?
Oh, good point.
Yes.
We went back and forth on this. The Waybridge is bolded to sort of hide the blurry line that gets created if you make 7 different Excel lines do the same thing. It like makes your head hurt. So I just made that thicker to show that it's a single district rate.
Okay, that's what I figured, but then I wasn't sure about.
Yeah, no, good question. Thanks for keeping us honest.
Comment to this final projected point for FY25 assumes the $10,000 yield, correct?
This was from the budget book, so this is the $1.47 that we had approved. This is showing, that same landing spot. Yes, that's what we're looking at there for the projection.
And you have to keep in mind that though we had this in the budget book, it was still an estimate, right? Because they don't finalize the yield until mid-April, I believe, right? And so we never know at the time we're doing the budget what that yield ultimately is until they bring everybody's budgets together and then compute it the one last time.
Yeah.
It's very, like you said, Ron, it's not fixed until it's fixed and everyone's voted by then, but it's very rare that it would fluctuate this much.
Yes.
Right, so we're sorry. So here we just list some next steps. I think, as I alluded to, there's kind of a hands-off approach right now because our forecast does have us kind of landing right where we already are in terms of board approval. We've got to pay close attention to the legislation to make sure that as the law moves through the various chambers and to the governor, that there aren't any tweaks to the mechanism that would impact our modeling. We're also going to keep a close eye on the yield rates for any new updates. Those we'll expect maybe in another week or two. What has to happen is a lot of data needs to get through a lot of bureaucracy. So school boards would need to trim budgets. Those either estimated budget cuts or board approved budget cuts would then need to be reported to AOE. AOE would then share them with VTax. We would take all that and synthesize it into a new yield basis. And so that doesn't happen fast. We want it to happen fast, and we wish that there was some sort of website where you could just watch sort of a live yield tracker. I asked them to do that, and they said no. But they have assured us, all the business managers of ASBA the other day, that they will do everything they can to push the yield projections back to the administration's as quickly as possible, with the understanding that it is sort of a two-way street and that information needs to be shared quickly in both directions. So, in the event that the yields gets lethargic or the law gets tweaked in a way that messes with our forecast or model, there is provision under the new legislation that a board approved budget could be reopened, modified, And this just shows that we have sort of that March 5th deadline to think about. It's sort of the last thing where that could happen because that's the day before we go to town meeting. And we don't want.
Isn't the 5th the
5th is the town
is the
meeting.
vote day,
Sorry,
so it
yeah,
has to be
So it'd
the
have to
day
be
before.
right
Morning of
before.
the 5th.
Yeah.
And even though, I was listening to testimony before the, some of the committees, and the Secretary of State representative on elections was basically saying, because people do early voting, that kind of thing, in that case, if a district does delay the vote, they would basically just, discard those and do a all new vote. So everyone would get to vote again, which is messy, which is like really messy. So, and I think, when I look at this, what's different for our district than a lot of other districts is that we were one of the districts that were disadvantaged. So all the time, we were working at really trying to bring the budget down as opposed to trying to figure out how much we can fit in there, right? And so now this new legislation basically accounts for the impact of Act 127 on us and gives us a runway. And really what we're looking at is all of those other things like healthcare and, the ESSER positions, that kind of thing, which is really what's caused our budget to go up, which, we've looked at, and they're very important things that we have to deal with, right? So I think we did a good job as we build it, and that's why, to try at this point in time, in my opinion, to reduce the budget doesn't make sense. If that helps. Yes.
So,
Go ahead.
in the unlikely event of the worst case scenario where we had to, reissue a warning, when would we have to revise our current warning? When's that deadline?
They need to have this whole thing done by the
March
15th.
15th.
Yeah, March 15th, because they want all the votes to have happened by, set up by the.
April
So we have a
15th.
warning annual meeting on the 27th. So
Yes.
is it the 26th we would have to revise the warning for the annual meeting?
I mean, statutorily, it would be March 15th, so that we're a full month before
Right.
the deadline for the delayed vote.
Yeah.
In reality, yes, we would probably need to decide sooner and
Right.
do all that sooner.
And there are other things that are happening at the annual meeting that need to be voted on,
Yeah.
right? It's really the
It's just the
Australian
budget.
ballot that
Yeah.
happens on the 5th.
Yeah.
So it's messy, but, my humble opinion is that we keep the status quo where we're headed, because we did do a good job in, really wrestling the costs that we had to and reduce costs where we, was hard to reduce. And I think we're in a decent position. Go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, and one of the things that you brought up, I think in our meeting today, maybe somebody did, was that this scenario of doing away with the cap and doing these discounts, actually over the 5-year period of
Yes.
the
Thank you.
transition
We do better.
helps to, maybe it doesn't eliminate a cliff, but it certainly ameliorates that idea of getting to the end in 30 and you're gonna fall right off the edge.
Right.
Because it does
Right.
allow it. So, I mean, there's some benefits. And, our goal here tonight was to sort of say, okay, where are we? It was just like I called Matt the other day after all this broke. And he said, so where do you think we're gonna come with this new rule, okay? Because I didn't know where we sat on that,
On the S curve,
on
yeah.
the S curve.
Yeah.
Because that just came out recently. And, he said, I think we're gonna come out about the same.
Yeah.
Or in that general realm, or like he's proposed. So that meant, number one, we didn't probably have to think to change to reduce our budget. Now, Mount Abe and those kind of schools that are in the 5% are having to think that, because that benefit doesn't help them as much. And
Yeah.
certainly those people that are up in the 20% plus, wow, they got a big job. So I think we're, although it looked awful.
Yeah.
A few days ago, I think it sort of comes out that we're probably in a little better stable place than most other districts.
And Jason tells me Suzanne has her hand up, so thank you, Jason, for monitoring that for us.
Was that you saying I could speak first?
Yes, yes.
I've been raising my hand and dropping it. So the other thing that's in this equation that the state hasn't really spoken about is the fact that they have, because there's such huge increases across the state with property taxes, is that they may not have enough money in their own reserves to help people that get help on their paying their own property taxes. So we still may have lots of citizens that end up defaulting on property taxes this year because they won't have enough money to pay for it and they won't be getting enough help from the state. So that's the other issue that they haven't addressed yet. Not that that's anything that we can control, but just wanted to put that out there, that that's one piece that they have not yet discussed.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any other questions on this?
I do want to congratulate Matt for doing a lot of work. And, every business manager in the state is up to their ears right now. And I think we're very fortunate to have somebody to give us this type of, I think, a pretty clear approach as to where we're at and what we can expect and the unknowns in that equation. So thanks, Matt.
It's an adventure.
Ditto.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll.
The next item is a facilities update, the most recent facilities committee meeting that Matt had laid out the scenarios we have for the various buildings. You can bring that up on the screen. Is that your plan? So Bruce and Matt, well, Bruce mostly put this together, Matt chimed in on it, and so that I can present to you tonight that report.
Are we sharing that?
Oh, good,
Sorry.
Bruce is not.
Yeah, it was sort of a comfort all of a sudden. It's, oh my God.
So, one of the things that Bruce and I talked about in the beginning of the year, and then brought to the facilities committee was this idea of something called a RAMP report, which sounds like a facilities report. It stands for repairs and maintenance project. And just an idea of sort of keeping tabs on what's been going on within the facilities department. We spend a lot of money on repairing and maintaining our buildings. We talk a lot about this, multi-tens of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance on the horizon and how we're gonna get there someday. But the fact of the matter is that on an annual basis, the repair and maintenance money that we're spending on our buildings is sort of that first level of capital improvements, right? We're keeping the buildings going by working on them. So I think it becomes important to sort of track that and get in the habit of bringing it to the board once or twice a year. So this is sort of our mid-year mark. First shot at it. The format, I think, will evolve. I think we'll probably get some more graphical data in here and work on the content a little bit. But I think for the sake of this and getting through it in the grand scheme of things, this board meeting, and it's nice and short. So the year so far has had a couple of themes.
Water.
Water and air.
And snakes, right?
Snakes.
Like the little snakes.
Yes.
Yeah, snakes and water. Yeah, there you go.
And I don't know that every year is gonna be so thematic in nature, but it certainly has been the case here. So we started by doing sort of a review of HVAC. We're discussing every school here and, really highlighting the fact that these are some of our biggest systems. And within that deferred maintenance monolith that we're staring down, many millions of dollars are plans to go into HVAC systems across the district. So these are tricky. HVAC is the circulatory system of the building. So anytime you're talking about a repair, a replace, a maintenance, these are systems that will have lots of sister costs, which is while you have no ceilings in the building, let's do X, Y, and Z, because it doesn't make sense to put fresh ceilings in only to have to rip them out a couple of years later. We call that a sister cost, and then grandfather cost would be one project triggering a legal or code requirement that you have to do more than you maybe initially bargained for. So HVAC is sometimes a little bit tricky in that it'll have a lot of those hidden costs associated with it. In Shoreham, we saw a boiler failure, right? And the boiler failure was actually the smaller problem, but highlighted some deficiency in the air handling system. So those boilers are under 5 years old, have plenty of usable life in them, and have been repaired effectively since, no need to replace. But what the breakdown of those boilers highlighted was that the air handling system, which was calibrated to pre-COVID standards, as were all of our air handling systems, is now obsolete, as are all of the air handling systems in the state since COVID. So the standards have risen, and we are now facing a deficiency. You could throw $1 million of costs associated with just replacing the air handling at Shoreham School. And again, that does not factor in some of those grandfather costs or sister costs that you would expect to incur. Cornwall also has a deficient system. It's the oldest one in the district and would require complete replacement. Again, that's an isolated $2 million. Especially in Cornwall, that number would be much greater because of all the other systems that touches. Weybridge HVAC is also in need of an update. That's 25 years old. However, needs new controls. That would be a small price tag to add new controls. $125,000. I think that one, unlike the other two, the first two, does have a little bit more standalone nature to it. Mary Hogan, we are, as everyone knows, working on A-Wing this summer. One of the things that had to get dropped was the second half of that project, which was C-Wing. C-Wing is one of the district's most problematic HVAC systems, but because of the complexity of C-Wing, it was going to be the more expensive of the two wings to complete. And so as costs of this project, which was meant to do two wings for $800,000, started spiraling up to $4 million, or way past $2 million at least, we had to say, all right, we can no longer afford to use ESSER funds to do two wings. We can probably do one. And now we're stretched just to fit one into the budget as it is. So we're thinking another $2.5 million to do the C-Wing. That's largely due to a lot of grandfather costs. So you have to pull down doors and entryways, and I think that would trigger some ADA compliance costs associated with access and building code.
Question?
Yes, Brian.
One of the things that you mentioned was the controls were not accessible. And your definition is that you can't locate them?
I believe what Bruce meant is that they don't sell them anymore.
Can the older ones be reconditioned?
I think that the maintenance team is reconditioning them as well as they can, but at some point,
Okay.
because they don't make them anymore, we would need to replace them.
So Brian, too, to follow up, Bruce mentioned in our facilities committee meeting that if they need to make significant changes to those controls, they have to have an outside contractor come in, hook up a computer and, turn off or turn on something. And that's
Those
the whole-
kinds of things are killing us, basically. To bring in all these other people and all these other things to do.
Yeah, it's not cheap, but it's also infrequent.
We're able to say that, at Mums, the high school Ripton, Salisbury, and Bridgeport, that, while there is definitely increased maintenance, there's deferred maintenance. We do feel like we're meeting the needs of the buildings. So no big red flags in HVAC there. Next is water. We did see another control failure at Ripton. This is kind of a similar narrative where the controls, they tried to fix, realized that, they were buying used systems on eBay because they didn't make the old ones anymore. And finally, we pulled the trigger and said, you know what, this system's obsolete, we need a new control system. And so that's why it took so many months to get that remedy in place.
I can remember asking about that in the facility meeting.
Everyone knows about Mums and our coupling, which again, we saw not just that one flood, but another minor one a week or so ago. Hard to say why metal pipes start popping. They're not supposed to do that. And the only sort of off the record theory that I have is it ties to the, some of the other water infrastructure work that the town of Middlebury has been doing in terms of running air through the pipes to mitigate leaky infrastructure, and then sort of water coming back behind the air and creating this high pressure deal. But yeah, nothing we can do to show that that's what happened at Mums. We're looking forward to insurance covering the expense associated with that emergency. And we are going to be updating the sprinkler system this summer. That 20 to 40,000 would be baked into the Mums maintenance budget. The high school has some leaks in the water piping. This is old copper piping. The issue here is that they built this copper pipe inside of cinder block walls with no access, and so there are issues where a water leak will appear in one spot. If anyone who's ever owned a house knows, when you see it on the ceiling in one spot, it's because it's halfway across the house in a totally different spot. And in this case, it's buried behind cinder blocks. So finding these pinhole leaks that are a byproduct of just old pipes is really hard to do because we don't know where they're coming from. There's no way to trace them back to their source, and getting to them involves breaking down blocks.
Question. Do we have a system in place now so that we can monitor things so we don't wind up with pipes going through cinder blocks? There should be somebody on site, either hired by the construction company, and we pay for them, to make sure these things are being done correctly.
Brian, that was
Well,
built
this
in
was built in
1954.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
That-
So back then, we really didn't have that responsibility.
Yeah,
I
the standard of
understand.
care is
Okay.
different.
yeah, I think that the infrastructure that's failing is many decades old. I don't think that the modern building code would allow that, and I think there's probably a lot more thought given to accessing pipes. I think the pipe materials are probably better. I don't know, I mean, it's just, it's old stuff, so.
But in the new stuff that is being done, somebody is monitoring.
Presumably.
And there's code. I mean,
Right.
the code has changed a lot.
Yeah, but I don't enjoy hearing presumably, because that is costing money.
I have
We
a
can-
question for
yeah.
Caitlin.
Okay.
Caitlin, are the water leaks at the high school like impacting instruction or learning, or like, what's your take on it?
No, they make people worried about mold, right? So when people see evidence of water running through places in our building that are not supposed to be wet, they raise red flags and ask for it to be remediated.
And for
You
some
see it
people
like
who
in
go
ceiling
back
fans.
before the high school was renovated, that was a major, major problem. In certain classrooms, people were sick all the time and it never sort of related. And all of a sudden, when that cleaned up, it was gone.
We have places where we run fans when there's a lot of rain, right, to dry it out. So we worry about moisture.
Mary Heather, you have your hand up.
We're past this, but I was just curious what the cost was for the Ripton water control replacement.
25.
Yeah,
Okay.
It-
Yeah, I just
it's
wanted to
controlling the well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's something like that.
And the water tank that reports.
Water
Yeah, yeah.
tank and it
I think
refills.
25, yeah. Again, I think one of those pieces of the report that would be useful is a real clear data table that puts some actual prices in,
Yeah.
some forecast prices in, and summarizes things that way. So we'll make sure that that's there in the spring. We have a miscellaneous section at the end here to detail a mums and high school initiative, 2 initiatives. So at the high school, we're working on renovating the learning lab, which is the area adjacent to the library. So it was the computer lab, and now it will be the learning lab.
It's currently the learning lab,
Currently, okay.
but we're now bringing the architecture up to match the current use.
The first time I remember seeing the space, it was storage for old desks and chairs, and was a little confusing why we were using it that way, but it sounds like it's on track to be given a renaissance. In order to do that, though, we need to put a divider in that separates the library from this multi-function learning lab. And so the project that we're working on right now, working with the architect on, is how to design a wall that creates that, as well as partitions off an office space for the 504 Learning Lab coordinator. And we're looking forward to getting some estimates for that project pretty soon. Any questions on that one?
Yes, we'll
Brian?
be coming back to that once you get the estimates.
Yes.
Because what I would really like to know is how this was going to change in a positive manner the education there. That I don't understand. I understand that we're looking at designs and walls and things like that. But what we don't have is information that it's actually needed and why it's needed.
Yeah, but that'll be part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the high school? At MUMS, we're starting the discussion about space utilization and programmatic needs. I think, throughout the fall, there have been a few mentions of some of the space issues at MUMS, programmatic needs at MUMS, and This is just a way of continuing to keep momentum at the school throughout the spring. It really does tie to how long of a lead time the design phase is at some of these, or for all of these, large construction or capital improvement initiatives. And so by having some of the groundwork laid in terms of bringing stakeholders in, having conversations early, it's going to be good groundwork to pass off to Dr. Baker if she gets started, to fold into the timeline of what a bond would look like. We have had several updates about what state construction aid might look like, and are trying to strategically align ourselves to be ready for that if and when it occurs. All of which is to say that the aid, when it happens, and Bruce sat on the state panel for how this all is going to come together. So he's got a little insider information, which would be great. When the state implements its construction aid plan, we don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully soon, they're going to want fully baked projects ready to go right off the bat. Otherwise, all school construction will stop immediately as everyone says, well, we're not going to do any more construction because we're going to wait for the 50% discount that the state has in the pipeline. The state will be building a system that allows the discount to be applied retroactively to costs that are incurred in the lead up to when it passes. And so by continuing to have momentum in the design and space usage study aspect of this, we stand a better chance of like being in the front of the line when they start giving out grants.
Mhm.
And then the last thing here is central office. So since we published this report, we have had the air handling quality assessment scores come in negative for any kind of environmental mold, mildew, or anything else. So when we first opened up the walls and ceilings, there were some dead animals due to the smell. The smell has gotten better since we removed those things. We have found significant cracking along one of the foundation walls. That's largely due to poor drainage against the exterior of the foundation. Some rotted sill siding and jams were what was opening up some openings for animals to come in. That's what we found. I think realizing that there is no significant mold or mildew or environmental hazards is a positive. Knowing that we don't have to do a major remediation of the building. We're sort of in the process now of figuring out how to put it back together and designing a renovation plan that would repair the drywall, add insulation, change the grading and drainage scheme so that the pressure on the foundation is removed, and otherwise just give it a fresh coat of paint. So that's the update for 49 Charles. Any questions?
Matt, sorry. Can I ask you
Go
something?
for it, Ellen.
I know that we talked about this list at the last facilities meeting, and I think it's obviously daunting to see and to know that this is, but some of many other repairs. I still don't know if I fully understand if these are all at the same priority level, even in sort of understanding the time threshold of when these would need to happen, or sort of what I guess that's the piece I'm still missing from all of this, is sort of even like the Cornwall HVAC $2 million number, if memory serves, which it might not, but I thought that part of that was also connected to possibly replacing windows, which would be about achieving high efficiency for the new HVAC system,
Yeah.
but But even within that $2 million, it feels like there's kind of a lot of additional nuance that we need to understand. I know we're not taking action on this now, but as we continue to engage with these kinds of conversations about facilities needs, I'm just still, I think it's really important that we have more of a sense of, are these all priority one, need to happen within the same time frame, whatever that is in 1 or 2 years? Or is this just sort of the top of the list? And then how do we further order it there to know, is the Waybridge, sorry, I can't scroll up, I realize, but is the Waybridge $125,000
Controls.
updated system equivalent to the new HVAC system or equivalent to replacing copper pipes, et cetera? I just don't think we have a full plan yet, and I don't know what what it's gonna look like to get to somewhere where the facilities committee and then the board has more of that information in front of us.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, this is more of a report on, what's been going on this semester and shouldn't be taken as a master plan necessarily, or at all. I think that, the intention of this report is to really just catch the board up on what the highlights have been for repair and maintenance projects across the district. The cost estimates for complete HVAC replacement across the schools with highest needs were included as a way of highlighting some of the ballpark costs that could be associated with planning to do a project like that. Just to sort of put context to what happened at Shoreham, right? To say like, what happened at Shoreham had happened in a way that we needed to immediately go to a full HVAC system replacement, or to replace air handler A, air handler B, whatever it was. What does that look like? And what happens if that happens at 2 different buildings in the same year? Like, what's our exposure in HVAC to some of these like critical expenses? So it's far from the entire story. It's definitely not meant to be a steering document for like what's happening in capital improvements overall. It's more like picking out some elements of our repair and maintenance routine work and highlight what we're noting as some trends.
So I think we need to move forward. Thank you, Matt.
I think, yeah, Mary.
Yeah, did you have a?
No.
Okay. So the next is the action around.
The personnel appointments, there are, an earlier version of the agenda had some incorrect listings. For example, item B was listed as a non-union position. That was incorrect. That's a step 25 of the master agreement. And items D and E were listed as resignations. They're actually retirements. So we'll be looking at accepting those retirements. So I'm requesting a motion to approve items as listed on the agenda. 3 appointments, and none of them are new positions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And except 2 retirements and also resignation. The retirement and resignation are all listed for June 3rd.
Quick comment on this.
Can we take the motion first? We're going to take the motion and then we'll
Thank you.
open it up for questions.
Sure.
Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the 3 appointments, the 2 retirements effective June 30th, and the resignation effective June 30th of 2024.
Thank you, Susanna. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ellie seconded it. Now I'll open it up for comments, questions. Brian?
This is just a personal comment. I really, if possible, would not accept Janelle's resignation. Because I talked with her, and she's very, very positive, works well with students and faculty, and has a great personality. And I think that school is really going to miss somebody when she does retire. Thank you.
But you'll be going against her wishes.
I know. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so can I have all those in favor of accepting the appointments and resignations and retirements? By, if I indicate by saying aye?
Aye.
Any nays? Any oppositions? Thank you. Okay, they're approved. Thank you so much. Under report of the chair, what I wanted to talk about briefly this evening is a little bit about the annual meeting protocol, because many of us that are here have not gone through an annual meeting, just know a little bit what to expect. And also we've been under kind of this weird hybrid mode because of the pandemic, so things didn't quite happen the same. So basically, there's 5 articles that were warned for the annual meeting that have to be acted upon at that meeting. And what will happen is that the board chair will briefly open up the meeting and act as the moderator until the real moderator can be voted on. And then at that time, we turn it over to the new moderator, who will then, or the elected moderator, who will then take control of the meeting at that point. And so at that point, you know, there's the clerk, the treasurer that need to be elected, as well as the Hanford Career Center representative from the board. From the community that's voted at that meeting. Thank you. So during that process, the board is able to make nominations, but the whole room actually does the voting. Okay, so I actually went back and listened to 2019 because it was so long ago since we really did a full-fledged meeting as such. Once we've gone through all of the business in the meeting, then that part of the meeting's over, and then it's the next section is really it's a town meeting, it's an update on, the budget. It's the second part of the meeting where there won't be any voting per se, but in this particular case, there will be a presentation on the actual budget. The articles will be introduced, but they will be voted on via Australian ballot. So I just wanted to give a little bit of input on, how that meeting happens. We typically, sit in the front, in the other room, and there will be audience there, and they can ask questions on the budget, that kind of thing. Any questions on that? Go ahead, Chip.
Is it in the band room as it's been in the
Yes.
last year? Okay.
Yes. So independent of, the budget, hopefully everything will proceed as we need it to. So there will be the vote on the 5th, but we still have this meeting, our annual meeting that we need to participate in. Mary Heather?
Do we have folks in mind for some of these positions?
Yes, that's a good question. I actually reached out this morning to see, where we stand.
Mhm.
And, Jim Douglas, I'm assuming you met with him, he's still keen on being the moderator. The treasurer is still Michelle Warren.
Mhm.
And I know, Mary Heather, you had reached out to Mary Gill, and Linda had said she had contacted her. So
Okay, so they've been in touch.
they have been in touch.
Do we know whether she's?
We don't know, so maybe we follow up.
Circle back.
Yeah, and follow up again. Last meeting for the community Hannaford Career Center representative, Linda did mention an individual. And so I reached back out to her, and she doesn't know for sure. So I'm trying to get contact for her information so I can follow up.
Okay.
So then at least we'll have all the positions covered.
Okay.
Yeah, so-
Remember though, you can also take them off the floor, so it's not our responsibility to find people.
Okay. I mean, it would be nice to have the positions filled though.
Yeah,
But if, obviously, at the meeting, someone can nominate someone from the floor. Absolutely.
the other one is Article 5, right?
Any questions on our annual meeting?
If there's a nomination from the floor, it has to be seconded. by
Yes.
somebody else.
But the Career Center is a separate article.
Okay, so then the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is that we're set for Dr. Baker's visit, which is happening tomorrow. And so in this particular case, she's going to Bridport, Weybridge, and Mary Hogan. We've set up a meeting with the executive director of Hope as well as United Way to kind of round out the rest of that day. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is that at our executive committee meeting, we talked about the board meeting that's the day before the annual meeting, which is on the 27th. And at that time, I was actually going to send an email out saying that we were not going to have that meeting, which I didn't because all the discussion that came up around, the new transition mechanism. But as long as we proceed, we don't necessarily need that meeting, right? And if there is a couple of items that come up, we could in fact warn it to occur like an hour before the annual meeting so that we don't have to come out again, for 2 nights in a row. So right now, my guess is we will not have to do the Monday meeting. And if there is something specific that we need to cover, we will, meet instead of 7, we can meet at 6 o'clock instead of requiring both nights. But hopefully, I'm afraid to even say that based on the current situation that's going on in the state, but hopefully things will proceed to the point where, we can definitely confirm, that meeting's canceled. But if it becomes bigger than, say, appointments, that kind of thing, then, we'd have to probably come together. But I'm hoping that's not going to be the case.
Barb,
Yep, Suzanne.
what time is she supposed to be at Bridport? The parents would like to know, but they don't know what time.
The
she's
parents?
supposed to be there.
I don't have that up in front of me.
Let me pull it up, Barb.
I can pull, yeah. That's the first school that she's going to be visiting. So it's really a visit with, typically parents haven't been coming into the other schools visits. It's with teachers and, just walking around. She's only going to be there like 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's 10:15, Jamie said. for
That's
Bridport.
10:15.
Yeah.
10:15?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, anything else on, any other questions? So next is report of the board. We listed every committee only because with the anticipation that we would not be holding the meeting on the 26th. So we can quickly go around and provide updates on each of the various committees, starting with communications and engagement.
Yeah, so it has been exceedingly difficult to do, in my opinion, a good job of communicating about this budget with all of the changing rules that have been happening. We do have the budget website up and we have the budget book up. We have some outdated FAQs up and FAQs from the, I think it's the fiscal office about Act 127 that is now also outdated. And I had asked Will to create a little video excerpt of one of Matt's budget presentations that I thought did a really good job of explaining how taxes are calculated and the Act 127 stuff that is also
Out of date.
unfortunately not as helpful to voters. So And then we have many, and thank you to those of you who signed up to help. Joanna was there this evening at the Rural Schools Concert in Salisbury to set up a budget table. Barb and I were at Mums last week. Jason was at Mary Hogan last week. And I'll be at the high school tomorrow for the Mums concert. Oh, yeah, and we did one at the high school.
But there's been a
The
lot of
church.
these.
Thank you, yes.
No, there's been a lot of these.
But, we've set up tables with some information just so that we can be available to voters. And I think people, the ones that we've been to, people have stopped by and expressed appreciation. They don't necessarily take a lot of materials or ask a lot of questions, but I think it's important for us to be there. So we will continue to be there. I always bring candy to try to lure people to the table.
It works with the kids.
It does work with the kids, that's true.
Worked with me, I stayed the whole time.
Jason, you didn't have any kids?
And then the other thing that we did, and this was huge help from Eddie Vallis and Jason and Barb and with Ellie and Trisha there as well.
And Jim.
To help us at MCTV to record a little sort of interview where we went through the FAQs to hopefully provide some voter education materials that are now also outdated and need to be redone. So the good news is that as we have been learning on this, and I really want to just echo Chip's appreciation for Matt and all of his hard work to keep us up to date with the changing rules and how it impacts ACSD. We've been able to kind of adjust the FAQs document. I did send a copy to you all. I don't know if everybody got a chance to look at it, but it is been revised quite a bit and reorganized to adjust to this new information. I would love to see it pared down a little bit more because every time I'm in a communications and engagement committee meeting, my co-members always remind me who our audience is. And our audience are, they're folks who just want to know, like Brian asked, are my taxes going up or down? Are kids and teachers getting what they need? And then maybe they want to know some details about why. But they don't want to get into the weeds like we do. So we have this FAQ document. If you have concerns or questions or something seems like a real sort of speed bump and you're struggling over it, chances are probably our voter community is as well. So please let me know and we can make adjustments to try to make things a little more understandable. I would like to get that posted up soon so that folks have the advantage of having as much time as possible with more current information before they head to the voting booth. Emily has also put together a sort of summary sheet. We do have to tweak that a little bit with the new information, but it's also a really nice summary that will go up. And I'm hoping we can maybe get together again with Jim at MCTV and try to do a take two on this effort because I think it would help folks. The one last thing
Q&A.
is, so we've got the Q&A coming up that I would really like to get a little more scripted because we've got some new information that we need to present to folks before they ask their questions. The only question that I have received through the form that we posted is this question: where does the $500,000 athletic budget go? And that was submitted by an ACSD taxpayer. I've not received any other questions through the form. So, we can be expected probably to just have questions coming in from folks who show up or we can operate from the FAQs document that we've already put together. And then I know that Tim and Barb, our original plan was to have Barb put in like a letter to the editor that was basically the summary statement from our budget book with some direction to our website where we have all of our, the landing page for all of our voter resources. And I know Tim, obviously, in his update had mentioned putting together a letter to the editor, an op-ed, to explain these differences. So I do want to just touch base with you all and with you guys about how we best, most clearly communicate what ACSD voters have in front of them without overwhelming them or confusing them any more than
Right.
the Addison Independent already has.
So what I did after this morning's finance meeting, instead of running the message from the chair, which has a lot more, I pared it down to really just focus on the current situation. And so I'd be happy to send that out to everyone. I did send it to the finance committee this afternoon. So it really focuses on, you know, whether or not we're gonna delay our meeting or not and why. So after this meeting tonight, I would be happy to just shoot that out to everybody. I do need to submit it in the morning if it's gonna go,
Right.
right? And so I definitely, but we hadn't really talked about delaying it as a board or not. I thought it was important for you to get Matt's talk first before I sent that out. So I will do that right before I leave tonight. I'll just shoot it out to everybody.
And Tim, yours, have you
It's
submitted yours already? Okay.
Yeah, and they're kind of, Tim and I had talked over the weekend, and mine is kind of to complement his and leave kind of the detail to his, but more as a board, you know, we believe that the current budget that we proposed, you know, there's no need
Should
to
move
delay
forward.
it, and why.
Right. So do you know, is it going to be sort of more like an op-ed, like a larger kind of thing? And then,
Yeah, mine's
and
supposed to be
not
an
just a
op-ed.
letter to the editor, correct?
Mine's not bad, hers is a letter to the editor.
Okay,
They hopefully work in tandem.
okay. Okay, gotcha.
The other thing I was wondering is Thursday night, instead of doing another recording for MCTV, maybe we record Thursday night.
Well, we were planning to
We were
record
gonna-
Thursday night anyway.
I know,
Yeah.
and so can we work together maybe to structure it so that it serves both purposes at this time? Because we're really running out of runway
Mhm.
to schedule another MCTV recording session. And all my charts, all those, they're all obsolete now that we were showing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, you know, the nice thing that we had with the MCTV format was that we had, you know, sort of a choreographed, we had our FAQs and we had accompanying visuals to go with things so that, you know, when we were answering a question, we were able to, much like our staff do when they're giving us a great presentation, you know, refer to some nice visuals. Which I don't know will be easily done in the 15th. We could try to choreograph maybe, but.
I mean, now that we have, you know, the FAQs, you know, we could look at those and see if there's maybe a couple. The level we did before, I'm not sure it makes sense
Yeah, I
now.
mean, we have to basically redo all those.
Yeah.
Graphics.
But yeah, they're all obsolete.
And I guess, you know, yeah, and I had planned to like have materials at the high school with, by the basketball entrance, and I just put a pause on it. Once we were like, the rules are changing, I felt very reluctant to put out more and more handouts, so. So that's where we're at. We have this Feb 15th meeting coming up, and we have the op-eds coming up, and then we have the annual meeting. So, any questions?
Thank you, Mary Heather.
Yeah.
Negotiations, Steve.
Yeah, there's not, we can't say much, but we are making a lot of progress. The teachers have, we have a number of tentative agreements on many of the non-money related issues. And money is always the last thing you talk about anyway, so given current budget situation, it's probably good that we're not talking about money quite yet.
Yeah.
But I think that we're moving through what we need to move through. So
Good. Thank you so much, Steve. Jason, facilities.
Has not met.
Okay, finance, Chip.
Met this morning, you heard it.
Policy, Suzanne.
We're gonna meet again on the 26th, as scheduled at 5:15. We have a follow-up on the wellness policy with Dr. Nugent, working on the use of the school policy, and then the state just came through with D3, which is the technology policy, which is required. They made changes to it, so we'll have to work on that as well.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Edison Central CPAC. I think Joanna's not here, so Suzanne, do you have anything to add?
They were supposed to have met or be meeting on the 13th, and no one could make it due to a bunch of conflicts. So they are hoping to meet on the 26th of February. And they are also working on a database of informational documents and websites for parents across the entire spectrum of ages.
Great, thank you. Millbury Community Television, the board meeting for last month was canceled. There's a meeting on Wednesday, so I have nothing to update. Parks and Recreation, Lindsay.
Nothing to update, really.
Okay.
Yeah, they just did both their big basketball tournaments, and Mary Hogan raised money at the concession stand, great community events, but no formal update.
Okay, and the Hannaford Career Center, Tricia and Steve, anything to?
We had a really good open house. There were a lot of people there.
I'm so sad I
And
just
there,
had a conflict.
it was, it was really well attended, and a lot of people were very happy with what they saw there. An important announcement, if you did not see, is that the Career Center just received a $100,000 grant, $500,000 for their advanced manufacturing program. That's huge. So that's really been, everybody's kind of really happy about that. Anytime you get $500,000, it's a good thing. But
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. Next is our time for public comment on any topic. And so at this point in time, if there's any public, there's none in the room. But if we have some on Zoom that are interested in making a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, and please ensure that your comments are within, contained to 3 minutes. So anyone on Zoom watching who would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, pausing here for a second to make sure. Then we can move on to the last agenda item, which is adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
And I have a second? Awesome. And so I'm only 10 minutes over. Yeah. Excellent, thank you.
You sound.
PowerPoint.